the Groupama FDJ, Nico, minded to set a hard pace. Thibaut Pinot is one of the few riders here heading to the Giro d'Italia, honing his form. There he is in fourth wheel. But you did rightly mention as well, they've got two clear options. Lenny Martinez is also looking very good and sits at only 1 minute and 10 seconds.
Yes, the French protégé, if I can say, has been very good the start of the year. He did an amazing time trial yesterday. I knew how good he was on the climb. I've seen him climb before. I hadn't seen him in a time trial, and he confirmed to be a real talent. And yes, they're playing those two cards. Only 4 riders, so they only have 2 teammates. They're going to have to pace themselves. It's still a long way to go. But they put the pressure on. They've taken the race on, and the bunch has lost about 20-30 riders now. And they're doing, Groupama guys are doing a really good job at the moment.
Yeah, Lenny Martinez, as we were talking about yesterday, saw that superb time trial he put in. So very high up at the first intermediate split as well. It's his first year at World Tour level. Still remember, only 19 years of age from Caen. A very diminutive, it's a pure climber, as was his father as well. World mountain bike champion back in the day, 52 kilos, so a real pure climber. But they've got 2 options. Thibaut Pinot there as well. And he's had some good rides this year, has Martinez. Second in the classic Grand Besançon-Double, that's a very hilly race indeed, and a real stealthy looking 12th place overall in the Vuelta Catalunya. And remember, he's still only 19 years of age and he's clearly feeling confident today. And they must be confident, like you said, they've only got 2 riders to look after, both Martinez and Thibaut Pinot. So they must be pretty happy with what they can do in the finale. And just look at the face there of the rider from UET Emirates. That's Michael Bjerg, really starting to struggle under the impetus, the pace that's being set by Groupama FDJ. And also we know, just focusing back on Thibaut Pinot, look back at the wins he's had over the years, especially in races like the Tour of the Alps, the Tour of Romandy. They've always been in really cold, attritional weather conditions, where he seems to be at his best.
He seems to be better at those kind of colder, wet days than on the very hot summer days. I think even the stage in the Tour, one of the stages in the Tour that he won was also one of those days where it was really grim. But I think, you know, they've taken the race on. Like I said, they only have 2 if they have 2 riders to look after, but they only have 2 teammates left, so they're gonna have to pace themselves really well. There's still a long way to go, but so far they seem to be quite in control. I think once they get to the bottom of the last climb, most likely the UAE team will pick it up and acceleration will go. And then it's all about Lenny Martinez and Thibaut Pinot to follow the best guys.
So it looks that way. But, since we've come on air, there's just been one man on the front of this group setting that relentless rhythm. So experienced, Thomas again, so strong, and clearly is just dragging this group over the top of this climb. Still got a fair way to go to the top. We crest the climb at 43 k's. They've got around 5 kilometers more of climbing. Average gradient of this one at just under 7%. Tion 2000, Tion 2000, a full percentage point steeper as Joseph Cherney just starts to drift off the back there. He's fighting with every fibre of his body to stay in contact here. And you could argue they could need him over the top of this climb as well, because we drop off, there's in a long plateau, we drop down again before we commence the climb. Oh, look at that. A little bit of on-bike yoga there, stretching out his back.
Yeah, when you're in that seated position for a long time, and you can see he's trying to really use his core. A lot of the lower back works on that kind of climbing position, and sometimes all you need is just to stand up straight, give you a bit of a stretch in the back, just to liberate all that tension. But he is hanging in there. He's surprisingly hanging in there quite well. When you think about the riders that were dropped from that group before him, but he is on the limit. I'm surprised to see the 2 Alula Jayco riders in the front, with Eddie Dunbar showing that he was in decent condition. I thought they would stay around to support him, but in a way it could also mean that these 2 riders, knowing that if the race was taken on quite early on this climb, probably would not have made it over the top. So it's great to also have the advantage, and you know that you have the riders on the other side of the climb. I always say it's easier to have riders in the front and make them set up than come back from behind.
Totally, especially with the pace that's being set now. This group's starting to thin out. There's the yellow jersey of Juan Ayuso, just sat about 4th or 5th wheel. Rafa Micah there, out of the saddle, just in front of Adam Yates. Just behind the yellow jersey, we have the massed ranks of Movistar, who had a superb day yesterday. Matteo Jorgensen, Bill Barter and Nelson Oliveira all finishing inside the top 10 on the time trial. is Jorgensen, keeping the white jersey warm for our race leader at the moment. Just at the back of this group, this is Brandon Rivera. And also Louis Mankey is looking like he's struggling.
Yes, indeed. It's quite. We know that he doesn't like to be too much in the front of the peloton when there's a lot of stress. But on a climb, you'd think that although he's trying to move there on the right, that was one of the riders from the breakaway. But also Kenny Elissonde, who's at the back surprisingly. He's also some rider who likes when the steeper the better, or the longer the better.
Indeed, first race that Elissonde came to true prominence was, of course, the Angliru stage of the Vuelta, which he won. It's not really many harder climbs than that. As we look at a zoom of his teammate Julien Bernard, after winning the opening climb of the day at Chamonix, scored enough points to take the GC in at the King of the Mountains classification. So good day out for him. And regardless of what happens up the road, it's just a day of focusing and try not to lose too much time and just wending his way up. But that's a good ride from Julien Bernard, and no easy task getting out in the breakaway, 3 days on the trot, scoring those points. And also just moving past there, that's the team car of Quentin Hermans. That's the Alpecin-Deceuninck team car, and there is Hermans, dropped from this group, but just back to the front. That Joseph Choni just shows he's, again, just that raw power, hasn't got the souplesse of the climbers that can just flick that low gear round. So he is just literally recruiting that raw power, isn't he? That higher, lower cadence, should I say, high torque work, using his back as well. And clearly in good spirits. And also, with Cherney, wouldn't really be expected to be out the road. Unfortunately, we've lost James Knox. Didn't start yesterday, unfortunately, but they've got Fausto Masnada in a good position. Cavagna in a good position, but I think it's way too hard for Cavagna today. So why not try something? And quite often when you've got nothing to lose, you can actually find a little bit more because the pressure's off. It's a strange dichotomy, isn't it? When you've got nothing to lose, therefore you can commit just that little bit more.
Yeah, especially on a flatter start like today, where bigger riders can have the possibility to go on the attack and make it into the breakaway. You just never know, and sometimes it's all about making it to the bottom of the last climb. Or having an easier day. You know, when you're in the peloton, you suffer the speed of the peloton. When you're in the breakaway, it's especially when the weather is not good. A lot of riders like to be in the breakaway because you're kind of more focused. You don't suffer the cold as much. You can eat, you drink. You have your car behind you for clothing. So on those kind of colder, harder days, you often see a lot of even the bigger riders or the rouleurs trying to be in that breakaway just to have an easier ride.
Still a sizable group here, riders in ones and twos slowly dropping off the back as we continue to winch our way to the top of this climb. Still several Ks to the top. Tops out at 43.4 kilometres. As you can see, quite an even gradient. Just going to cast our minds back a couple of years to the last time we finished at Dion 2000. You might remember we've already discussed it a couple of days ago, but it's worth reminding ourselves. Stage 4 of the 74th edition of this race in 2021. The stage is exactly the same stage, actually. Same climbs, same start. Started in Sion over exactly the same series of climbs. So this is a replica of the stage of 2 years ago. Michael Woods ultimately won that stage from Ben O'Connor. And Geraint Thomas was in third place. And Geraint Thomas famously took a tumble in the last 50 metres of the race because the conditions were so cold, lost the feeling in his hands. Lucas Hamilton on that occasion was fourth. Fausto Masnada was here in fifth, and the top 10 was split over 2 minutes. So every rider inside the top 10 bar from 2 finished on their own. So an indication of the severity of this climb and just the length of it as well. So they're going to be on that climb for nearly an hour, probably 50 minutes of climbing, which by any stretch, to have this so relatively early in the year, this could be one of the biggest climbs they face all season. Even when you factor in the Grand Tours, Nico, this is a proper epic climb, isn't it?
It is, and it's very hard to replicate such a climb, even back home or on training camp, except if you're on Mount Teide or down in Sierra Nevada. But it's extremely difficult to find an hour-long climb, especially before the months of April or May, when most of the Alps or the Pyrenees are closed with the snow. You know, you can't really go and do the Stelvio in April. It's the roads are closed, so a lot of these riders have not done a climb as long as that and and as you mentioned, the last time I was up, a lot of the gaps open up, and the riders just literally arrive one by one.
Yeah, some big time splits. In fact, the first 20 riders, just to go a little bit further to give you a sense of how hard this stage is going to be, has been already. The top 20 riders were with nearly 6 minutes between them. So it's absolutely blown to pieces on this final climb. As Joseph Cherney drops back, jersey fully unzipped. Looks like we've got a couple of spots of rain. There is the threat maybe of some rain today. We had the threat of rain tomorrow in the individual time trial, but thank goodness for everybody, especially given the technical nature of the descent and the run into the line, which did upset one or two riders. I think it's fair to say that it's one of the most direct interviews I've ever heard from Mikkel Bjerg. Didn't really like it, although posted a good time. But a few spots of rain now. Now the top of this climb, the crest, as I say, 43 k's to go. They drop down, then there's a plateau. They head through the last intermediate sprint of the day. No bonus seconds on up, it just points towards the orange jersey. And then they commence the climb with 21 kilometres to go as we look at the back of this field. And just another quick bit of housekeeping as well. Had some information in relation to Rui Costa. Apparently the chainring bolts on Rui Costa's chain set were the wrong sort. We'll go into that a little bit more detail. But we wish him all the very best, but just a human error, not a failure of any equipment. So 1 minute 52 seconds. I don't know if you caught that little bit of news, Nico. It was a strange situation for Rui Costa on the ramp of the TT. But basically, they analysed what had happened, and he was running a double chainring on his chain set on that particular day. But the chainring retention bolts, where you screw the chainring bolts into, were too shallow. So the splines had only gone in a couple of turns. So when he put the power through the pedals, it just sheared off. There wasn't enough strength, there wasn't enough threadage to actually to retain them. So normally speaking, so basically he was using the chainring bolt for a single chainring, which are shallower. So that was the mistake. So no equipment failure. But quite an interesting one, but we wish all the best to Rui Costa in his recovery. One of several riders who no longer in this race. Still some solid riding here by Groupama, FDJ, Martinez just in second wheel there. Pinot looking good, starting to grimace as we move through the cloud line. I mean, Nico, you've ridden enough of these big climbs in these sorts of weather conditions. Just describe what it's like as you get higher and higher and the air gets cooler. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? But incrementally, you start to notice, well, I did, that cold air in the bottom of your lungs as it gets. It's a really interesting sensation when you get above 1,500 meters, nearly 2,000 meters elevation.
Yes, definitely, and it has a massive contrast with the fact that you often cooking it, and your jersey is often very wide open, and you see the riders, well, not the FDG riders, but most of the riders will have the jersey. You can see Bjorg just behind them with the jersey slightly open. But the breathing, yes, you're breathing in that kind of cold, fresh air straight into your lungs. But your core body temperature is pretty high because you're pushing so hard. It gets really difficult once you blow from that group, from the front group or from the back group, and eventually you start not going as fast, and your core temperature drops, and then it gets very cold. The big issue is what's happening just now. Certainly been very protective, just going straight to the car, putting the jacket on. There's no point of catching cold on this very long descent before you've loads of time to take it off before the final climb. He also knows that for him it's going to be difficult to play for the win, so it's all about not catching cold, putting the jacket on, doing a safe descent, getting to the bottom of the climb, taking the jacket off, and then kind of basically waiting for that group to catch him. As we can see, that the gap has lost. It was 3 minutes when we were on air. It's down to 1 minute 45 now almost. The pace in the peloton is on, and the chase is on.
Yeah, it certainly is. Another 20 seconds or so, as you said. Just towards the top of the climb, the gradient actually eases. As you could see, Joseph Cherney dropped back, took the cape. And that is just belt and braces, bike racing there. Experience, not leaving it to the last 100 meters to put a cape on, and you're on the descent. We've seen riders do that in the past, but making sure that he gives himself plenty of time. He can zip it up over the top. Quite often the hardest thing, if your hands are cold especially, is actually getting your arms and your hands through the tight-fitting cuff on the gloves. As well as The technology in jerseys, the technology in rain capes has changed. They're far more fitted than they used to be. They used to be flapping all over the place and losing watts left, right and centre, but they're far more fitted than they used to be. And you do need to give yourself a bit of time to get your hands through those apertures. But Joseph Cherney back on, and looks like they're cresting the climb now. Well, welcome back to the broader Eurosport GCN family. Thomas de Gendt takes maximum points over the penultimate climb of the day at Suon. And now they'll plummet down the other side. I think it's fair to say that he has been the main protagonist here, driving this group. Nobody has even given him a turn. And the thing is, when de Gendt's on form, Nico, and you'll know this, you've ridden with de Gendt, he is just ridiculously powerful. He is like a diesel. He can outride the peloton at times when he's on peak form. And in situations like this, especially on a drag, you just got to leave him to do it. Sit in the slipstream and then come by him when you can. Yeah,
he's one of those riders that that can just go for the whole day. He doesn't have one of those crazy explosive powers, but he just can sustain such a high level of power for a very, very long time. The de Gendt of today is not really the de Gendt we saw 4 or 5 years ago. Like everyone else, he's aging too. But I remember some of the years, especially in Tour Catalonia, where he would do the whole day with 2 minutes on the peloton, and when the peloton would start chasing him down, they weren't going to get 1 second off him. And I remember the stage where literally he was the first man to attack, and we just never caught him. He just did the last climb. He was only about a minute on the bunch, and the bunch was proper going for it, and he was impossible to catch. And he didn't do that once. He repeated that over and over the years. After a while, the bunch was aware of who this de Gendt was, and they weren't going to let him up the road anymore. So it's a lot more difficult for him now to do what he used to do. They don't give him 7 minutes anymore. They keep him at 3 or 4 minutes maximum. But yes, he was smart enough to make the most of those years, and he got himself some incredible wins in his career.
He certainly did. Just rolling over the top, this is Gianmarco Garfoli of Astana, Kazakhstan, on his own, and this is the bunch. Nearly caught over the top, but no, I remember the exact stage that you were talking about, Nico, because I was commentating on it with our friend and colleague Carlton Kirby. He was in a break. The rest of the break got caught, and as you say, there was a long drag to the line, and he just held off the peloton. It was quite incredible to see, but say not the man of 5 years ago, but clearly a force to be reckoned with. As Garfoli is about to be caught. This actually looks like it's somebody else attacking over the top of this climb now. Yes, it is. Somebody else from Astana attacking over the top. Quite an interesting one. Tell me, one of their riders that did a good ride yesterday, pretty respectable ride, Harold Tejada, who now sits in 14th place, the best of the Astana team. The best of the breakaway out in front in terms of the general classification. Actually Ben Zweihoff. He sits at 4 minutes and 28 seconds, so nobody in the breakaway posing any threat to the lead of Juan Ayuso.
Quite an original move there from Astana. It's yeah. You kind of do that when there's still a lot of road on the climb to get to the top, not when you're literally on the KOM. Unless you're planning to really go for it on the descent. But there's a long valley road. He's with a teammate, but is a teammate that's been dropped from the first group. So it means, you know, he's not going to be one of the top riders that will be able to open a gap on the flatter bits, bring him to the bottom of the last climb. But also means that he'll be technically a lot more tired when he gets to the bottom of the last climb, and probably once the battle of the bigger guys in the back of the peloton starts, he won't be able to follow. So it's a bit of a suicidal move there from Astana. I think sometimes some teams, when the race is too hard and they have no one in position to win, you kind of try and think too much and invent these kind of suicidal things to just try and be part of the race, because you know you've lost it anyway.
Yep. It is an interesting one. Couldn't quite work it out. It is indeed Harold Tejada, the young Colombian rider. Well, say young, 26 years of age now. Vitalito, trying something a little bit different to get an advantage on the descent, but as you said, not exactly you'd imagine the most ideal place to attack, but they've done it now. They're committed to this move. It's one thing you do, never write these riders off, and I'd never criticize riders for attacking, but what we do need to do is be honest in our observation and try and understand the rationale of these attacks. Quite often they're very well thought out. There's clear thinking and reason behind them. Quite often it's in consultation with the road captain, other members of the team, and it could have been a plan that happened beforehand, but this one seems like it's just that little bit more instinctive, taking an opportunity when they can. They've opened up a lead of 9 seconds. Bit of a sketchy descent here. As I say, well-engineered road here, Nico, but with the weather conditions we've got, it's the worst kind of descent you want, where lots of it are totally dry, and then you get these corners. You come into a corner that's been in the shade, and it's wet as well. So not super sketchy, but makes for a little bit of nervous descending. So the riders, the GC riders in the bunch are going to want to be right near the front, and we might see some pretty big gaps open up on this descent quite possibly.
Yes, totally. You can actually see some of the wet patches from the helicopter shots. But on these descents, it's the danger is because they're semi-technical. You have these really long straights, and then you have a succession of turns. You pick up quite some speed, so you're heavy on the brake. And of course, that's kind of the things that you all dread when you're coming down in the wet, is those heavy braking to hit those corners. So you carry up a lot of speed on those kind of faster curves, but then you have to brake hard on those few sketchy corners.
The remnants of our breakaway there. Got Foley and Tejada. Opened up a few seconds, 11 seconds now, so they quite clearly are pushing on this descent. Foley, as Nico said, one of the, well, still surviving members of that breakaway. You'd imagine there might have been some communication over the radio saying, look, we're going to try something with Tejada. He is a decent climber, but what he doesn't want to do is invest too much with a weaker rider. When I say weaker rider, only weakened by the fact that he's been out in front all day on some very difficult terrain and has been dropped on the climb, so you do wonder how much he can offer up. But in contrast, as we look at the back of the bunch, often a rider that's dropped can find a little bit of a second wind and find something special for maybe 10 or 15 minutes on the flat, just to go all in before completely capitulating. So he's clearly holding a little bit back, as they now stolen 12 seconds, not making too much inroads. But once we drop off the first part of the descent, the road does flatten. Although it's still dropping, it's far flatter. We're getting to that point very shortly, as our 5 riders in front continue to relay. Good effective group here. Just a reminder, Ben Zweihoff of Germany and Bora Hansgrohe. He's the rider just at the back. Joseph Czerny is there for Soudal Quickstep, the Czech rider who took the opening prologue of this race. Struggling on the climb earlier on, but has got himself back into contention. Got 2 riders there from team Jaco Alula in the form of Lawson Craddock and Chris Juel Jensen, and then rounding out our 5 riders in front, Thomas de Gent, the Belgian, riding for Lotto Destiny, and a gap holding steady now at 1:50. 12 seconds between with our riders just in between the duo from Astana. This is that little flatter section that it got onto now. Foley driving hard, trying to drag Tejada. If they pull this off, it'd be quite an interesting one. But the thing is, when you're riding on the flat super hard to the bottom of the climb, it's then very difficult to get into any sense of rhythm on the next climb itself. It's such a different set of sensations.
So that kind of tacking usually works when there's a smaller, reduced chasing group. If the bunch was half the size, it would make a lot more sense. But on such a substantial big bunch, a peloton where you have a lot of teammates that can ride behind on those valley roads, this is the point that I was making, where it's a lot of work for.
So the duo on the screen at Gianmarco Garofoli and Harold Tejada, Colombian and an Italian. It is the Italian on the front, who's the part of the early breakaway, driving, trying to open up a bit of a lead, perhaps to give his teammate a buffer before the final climb. It's a bold move, it's a brave move, and they have managed to open up a little bit of daylight between themselves and the peloton. But there's another group just in front of them, just a handful of seconds now. Quentin Elmans of Alpecin de Koning and Julian Bernard, King of the Mountains now. He will be crowned the King of the Mountains if he finishes tomorrow. Doesn't need to score any more points, just needs to get himself to the finish. They're at 1 minute and 26 behind our 5 riders out in front, who are relaying nicely. And this is that flatter section that I was talking about, that will take us through to the intermediate sprint. Then we'll drop down the second part of the descent, and then we'll commence the long haul, 20-kilometre climb, in fact 21-kilometre time to the top of Dion du Mille, 2,095 metres above sea level. Changeable weather conditions atop the climb, as we saw this time 2 years ago. Certainly suit certain type of rider and will give us a clear indication of ultimately who will run out the winner of this race. Tomorrow, another challenging stage, but perhaps a race that's a little bit easier to control. I think near the top of this climb today, it will almost be, as we've seen in the past, every man for himself. And the team, I think, with the best options does appear at the moment to be UAE Team Emirates, with Juan Ayuso, Adam Yates. I think it'd be too hard for Finn Fisher-Black, but he only sits at 34 seconds in 7th place. But I think the Ayuso-Adam Yates combination is going to be an interesting one. Now, just look at that rock formation there. That is the Pyramids of Hussein. That is a completely natural rock formation. I did have some information on it for you, but that's absolutely incredible. Yeah, it's a row of slender pyramids formed by erosion and capped with stone hats. They're called fairy chimneys. That's their nickname, or hatted young ladies. A spectacular natural phenomenon created during the last glacier, when the glacier retreated, leaving behind these compact shapes packed with large blocks of rocks. So yeah, natural monuments of national importance there, Nico. Very unusual. It does look man-made, but I can assure you they are not.
There's actually a similar one in beside the lac of Briançon. It's
Yes,
called Les Demoiselles Coiffées. Actually has the same name.
Is that the Ladies of the Iron Cross?
No, I think it could be called like that, but it's also called Les Domaines Coiffées, les Demoiselles Coiffées, so the ladies with the coiffée.
The hat. Sorry,
the hats, yeah, the same name.
And Bernard just in between there, but a good day out for Julian Bernard. He's going to be pretty happy with that as they go past the rocky hatted ladies. That is quite phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal the way that's been eroded away. Those rocks haven't been placed there. That is just utterly staggering. And the riders will pass through that. I don't think there'll be too much of an opportunity for the Garofoli and Tejada to take a look as they pass through. Garofoli actually is doing a good bit of work here. They've managed to open up a little bit of a lead here, but it's still only 16 seconds, but they're working hard. You just never know. Tejada clearly must be feeling good, and I noticed that Tejada, Nico, isn't doing too much of the pulling. It's all Garofoli just to make sure Tejada's rested. Otherwise, as you said before, if you are working hard and you hit the climb, it could take a while before you can even get into a sense of rhythm. So Astana at the moment, it's still a bold play, but they're doing the right thing with the resource that they have.
Yeah, of course. The whole idea of going to bridge across to that rider in the front is to have him put all the effort on the descent, give him a head start for the bottom of to be in the start at the bottom of the last climb.
So in about 6 kilometres time, the riders will pass through, well, leaders will pass through this intermediate sprint point. There won't be any tussle or sprinting there. They'll be working as a unit. Confirmation that Thomas de Gendt took maximum points over the first category climb of Sua. And now Chris Juliensen, a man with a Irish and a Danish passport, a rider who's won on Swiss roads in the past, a couple of years ago, again in awful conditions, took a stage of the Tour of Switzerland solo. Strong rider, part of the engine room of Team Jayco Alula. So many times we've seen him driving hard on the fronts, but has now got an opportunity. What their plan is today remains to be seen. A lot will depend, of course, on the legs of Eddie Dunbar. Doesn't sit too far down. He is the second best placed rider of the Team Jayco Alula team. The best placed is Matteo Sobrero at 54 seconds. But by his own lofty TT standards, I think Sobrero will be disappointed with his ride yesterday. But what they've done is clearly turned things around. They've turned disappointment into an attacking mindset, and that's the best way to play it, isn't it? Get riders up the road, despite the relative disappointment of yesterday from Sobrero's perspective. What you do, you reset, you go again, Nico, don't you?
Yeah, Alula is one of those teams that's always capable of turning things around, and we've seen them in stage races. They're very good. They fight for jerseys, they fight for stages, and if one thing's go out the window, they focus straight away on other things. They're a team that's quite renowned to just go in the attack and kind of go and actually race.
Yeah, I know Matt White's, it's a pleasure talking to Matt White quite a lot at various stage races, especially the Giro and the Tour. And it's like, Matt, you know, if they are ever in difficulty and they've had problems with their overall strategy and Lady Luck has gone the wrong way, There's a real pragmatic approach to racing. It's just, well, we're just going to reset, go again, and throw some bombs up the road. That's just, I love that attitude, that never say die attitude. Old school, but also, you know, sets, you know, they think about what they do, but also you're never going to win a bike race if you don't take a risk. It's what it is all about. That's one thing that's for certain. As these two riders are doing here, Garofoli and Tejada, as the rain starts to fall.
For those who are making the little jokes about how many teammates I had in the peloton, well, actually, Matt White was also one of my teammates, but I never raced with him. We back in Cofidis, I was my first year pro, and we had completely different programs, but we were technically teammates in Cofidis back in 2005.
Yeah, I saw a couple of people on Twitter having a little bit of fun. It does appear that pretty much every rider we discuss has at some point been a teammate of Nico's, and there's a super hype. But you've had a long career, mate. There you go.
If you do, Matt, 7 teams plus or minus 30 riders per team. It's a lot of riders that are potentially, okay, a lot of them have retired now, but potentially it's over 200 riders that I've been teammates with.
Very well connected is Nico Roach, that is for sure. Well, the gap here, 2:07 now to the bunch behind, so the group in front working exceptionally well. Zweihoff, Czerny, Craddock, Euler, Jensen and De Gent. The duo of Garofoli and Tejada yet to join up with Hermans and Bernard. And there they are, well, right on cue. They're about to be caught. And Garofoli is doing a great job here. It's still under 20 seconds, 17 seconds. Tejada sits in the slipstream. He is a very gifted climber, is Harold Tejada, now 26 years of age. Took a stage of the Tour de l'Avenir back in 2019. It's a contract year for Tejada. No super standout performances yet so far this year, save for an 8th place on the stage of the Tour of Oman. But on his day, an exceptionally gifted climber, that is for sure. It does look like the way we're going at the moment, Nico, that this group will at least hit the bottom of the final climb to the line in front, and they will see which team takes up the pacemaking. And with it being such a long climb, there may be a couple of teams that actually take it up, because you're going to, UE for example, they've got a good squad, but 2 of their riders are protected, or even maybe even 3. Although I think it's going to be between Yates and Ayuso. Of course, Oliveira sits high. Oliveira did a great time throw. Yeah, Maika is another rider with an option, but he'll be used as a domestique deluxe and will stay very deep into the race, possibly rolling a top 10 by himself. But yeah, he'll be all in for Ayuso and of course Adam Yates. But we don't know how they're going to play. That's one thing we don't know, and a lot will depend on how Ayuso can cope with this particular climb. And his interviews have been very informative. I think he's playing his cards close to his chest. He said he's happy with his gone, but day by day his legs are really starting to hurt, and he says that he doesn't even think he's in that great a form. So that's quite worrying as we head deeper into the year for the rest of the riders. But again, I think it's a fair point, isn't it? When your last race was the Vuelta, 3rd place overall, he's then been suffering with that injury, nerve damage to one of his legs. He isn't really going to know, because there's no climbs like this that you can do properly in training unless you're at altitude. Racing against this sort of opposition, there's going to be a lot of unknowns, quite clearly.
There'll be a lot of unknown for him and for a lot of the riders, as we can see now as we speak. The UA team going to give a hand to the FDJ Groupama team.
Looking through the field at other squads. What do you think? Yep. Jason Osborne. You can just hear that has gone right down. That's not soft, that is flat as the proverbial pancake, right on the rim there, and not what you want on a wet descent. But Jason Osborne, oh look at this, this isn't going to work out. Garofoli is about to be caught despite the best efforts. I think it's just best they wave the white flag now. It was an interesting attempt, it didn't come off. We've been ever so slightly critical of this move, but like you say, sometimes it just doesn't come off, Nico. It's just one of those things. But it was an odd one, but at least they tried.
The moves are always great to have. There's just moments for them. And clearly, I think, and I evaluated that it was, in my opinion, a very strange moment for it to happen. And it was clear they were going to get caught at some point, just with how the shape of the race is done.
Moving to the back of the bunch here. Jonathan Castroviejo. Best placed rider for the Ineos Grenadiers at the moment is Ethan Hayter, but I think it might be a bridge too far for Ethan Hayter. Castroviejo is the best placed rider for the Ineos Grenadiers, 8th at 36 seconds, and then Egan Bernal at 1 minute and 19. So on the final phase of this descent, we've had that little plateau. Garofolo about to join the two riders that have been chasing for the best part of 10 kilometres. And I tell you what, Garofoli is not giving up. He's continuing with this big effort.
He is, yeah, full grimace, really committing.
Yeah, got a contract through. He's only a very young rider as well, so basically doing what's asked of him from Ancona, a young 20-year-old Italian. Again, is a very good climber on a stage in 2021 of the Giro Ciclisto della Valle d'Aosta, which that range of mountains not a million miles away from here. This particular range of mountains, actually this is the Valesian Alps. They actually change over the border, so this particular range of mountains actually ends up in Italy as well. It's a beautiful range of mountains surrounded by some of the biggest mountains in the Alps. In fact, the Matterhorn you'll be able to see on a clear day from the top of Tion 2000, and also the Dent Blanche as well. Several mountains topping out at well over 4,000 meters. And this range of mountains also known as the Pennine Alps as well, but in French they are the Valesian Alps. So various words in Germany too, but the Pennine Alps, also known as the Valesian Alps, but a beautiful part of the world. And a real change of terrain here. The second part of this climb looks like they've just gone off onto a little country road here, Nico.
Yeah, they literally went from a pretty wide normal road to a lot narrow section now. So saying about the Astana riders, at least by tackling the descent in the front, will give them that it's a much safer place.
Certainly is. They will be approaching that very tight left-hander in a good position, and we will in only a couple of kilometers time hit the bottom of the final climb to the line. So Gianmarco Garofoli has done a decent job here, takes down another gel. He's certainly got Tejada in a good position. They're just approaching that very technical corner now. As you can see, wet roads, but the place to be, definitely in front here where you can pick your line. Determined not by other people, and that's a good place to be. I think it's more fortune than anything else that they've ended up in this position, as Groupama FDJ also just sweep past. They're coming up to that bend in a minute, as we say, where they're coming off this big main road onto a very small back lane, and this hairpin to go, and then that sharp left-hander, as you can see. Fingers crossed everybody gets around that one okay. Gap to our 5 leaders, as you can see now, 1 minute and 47 seconds. We're just sweeping off, well, not exactly sweeping off, cautiously picking our way around the corner, should I say. You can just see that drop off on the apex of the corner, almost like something on a pump track rather than a mountain descent. That's a real steep drop off there, isn't it? And just look at the concertina effect here. So Tejada and co in a good position, because you're going to find yourself really out of position here, given that little pinch point there, Nico.
Yeah, and definitely going to do a nice little sprint at the back of it. But it seems that the riders are going down quite safe. You can see they didn't pick up much time on the group in the front. And usually on a wet road, when the bunch is still in one group, it's usually a clear sign that the bunch has decided to take it safe, or else it'd be riders everywhere. I think it was good to see riders actually not always making the most of their position to put the pressure, and sometimes just have a safe descent.
Well, they're actually on the climb now. The start of the climb to Tion 2000 has begun. Let's have a conversation with Juan Ayuso, our race leader.
What was the feeling waking up and putting this yellow jersey on?
No, it's great. It's my first yellow jersey in a stage race in the World Tour, so I'm very happy, and I'm keen to try and give my best in the final climb.
How confident you are and how to play your card with Adam being well placed too?
Yeah, we're both will play, so I think we have the team has cards to play. So yeah, I'll give my best and try to defend as best as possible the yellow jersey.
You think it's a climb you're ready for at this moment as you are just coming back to competition?
I think it's one of the toughest climbs all throughout the year, so for sure it's hard to be ready. But yeah, I'll give my best and see where I can arrive.
Okay, one. Best of luck.
Very insightful, eloquent interview from our race leader, as he pointed out. The first time he's worn a yellow jersey in a World Tour race. And I would imagine, Nico, it's certainly not going to be the last. UAE Team Emirates have got a wealth of riches amongst their roster, and the young Spaniard signed up for UAE Team Emirates to the back end of 2028. I think that might be the longest contract in world cycling. But he's looking good. I think it's worth reflecting as we hit the bottom of the climb, or the bunch yet hit the bottom of the climb. I think that's another puncture.
Yep.
For one of the riders, that's Jesus Harada, a very untimely puncture for the Spaniard there. But because of the unknowns that we're talking about here, we're not deep into the season, still relatively early, no Grand Tours. This is, as he pointed out, going to be one of the biggest climbs of the year, factoring in the Vuelta, the Giro and the Tour de France. UAE are going to need to talk a lot, aren't they, as the climb gets on. Yates in particular are going to need communication between him and Ayuso if they're going to get this race right and win the race, take the stage, hold on to that lead heading into the final stage. One thing that is crucial here is they need to talk to each other.
Yes, and as we can just see now, the FDG looking for Thibaut Pinot, who must have drifted back, and that's why they've slowed down now. They know their team leader is not on the wheel. That's why he's talking on the radio. He's probably saying, Thibaut, where are you? Should I take the pace up? Oh, Woods.
Oh, is that Woods? Looks like Woods has come off. Yep, the way he's holding himself there. And the amount of time has already been at the side of the road. That is not looking good for the Canadian. Remember, he is the, well, not the defending champion, of course, but last time they raced up it, he won. And this is an interesting little acceleration from Brandon Rivera, who's gone clear. So Rivera accelerated away. The gap still 1 minute 38 seconds. So an interesting play here from the Ineos Grenadiers. But given the fact they don't really, with Egan Bernal still on the comeback trail, although there's been glimpses of good form. Let's have a look. This is the moment. Oh, Woods. Oh, tangled with one of the riders from, looked like one of the riders from Arkea. Samsic there, but that was a nasty crash. Locked up and high-sided the bike. Not good at all. This is Ben Zweihoff, part of the breakaway. He's now been dropped, leading just two riders out in front. It's the figure of Chris Jensen and Thomas de Gent. 1 minute 32 seconds. De Gent is an absolute machine, but the gap is coming down. That was a nasty crash there, Nico.
Yeah, nasty crash. I'd be curious to know what caused it. He was close to the Arkea Samsic rider, but I don't think one caused the other to crash. I don't know if he got caught up with the corner and saw it last minute and hit the front brake too hard, but it was a very strange crash to have a high side on that kind of left-hand corner. But yeah, for sure he hurt it himself there. Just even with the shock of landing as we passed the 20k to go sign.
20 kilometers to go now. Queen stage of the Tour de Romandie. Brandon Rivera out in front on his own. Now, with the fact that this climb is going to be a little bit too hard for Ethan Hayter, one would imagine, now sitting in 10th place, already with that stage win, I think they can play a free hand here. Egan Bernal, I think, will try and do what he wants, but clearly they've said, well, let's just see what happens on this climb. As we can just see a couple of other riders starting to drop back. That is Lawson Craddock, just in the blue jersey at the top of the screen. 1 minute and 35 seconds. Thomas de Gent leading this race now. 19.4 kilometers to go. There is the solitary figure of Brandon Rivera, and the formation has changed at the front of the bunch after a little bit of reconfiguring, making sure that the leaders of the respective teams that we believe are going to have an impact on this race, UAE Team Emirates, Nico, have picked up the pace as Harada chases to get back on. That's an untimely puncture that was.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult for Jesus Harada to make it back, but he's going to have to try. He was one of the protected riders from Cofidis on this race. very unfortunate to puncture literally at the bottom of the last climb when the speed starts to pick up. And yes, although it's a long climb when you start over a minute down, it's a long way up. We're talking about how difficult this climb was. Well, today is a difficult day, but a difficult climb because it's just, as we could just see, Chris Jensen accelerating. Wasn't happy with the speed. Very characteristic of himself. Always pushing a big gear.
Yeah, he does like to roll a gear on, doesn't he?
But the climb today is not only it's an hour-long climb or a 50-minute-long climb, but it's also cold. You hit altitude, which is for the first time, unless some other riders done for Catalonia. But it's one of the first time this year where you peak so high in altitude. We all know how much the Colombians perform a lot better at altitude, for example. So it's not a surprise to see some of the Latin Americans have a go on this kind of stage. But remember, it's also very cold, but it's also the accumulation of having done almost 4,000 meters of climbing today. So fueling is going to be extra important. And although you can be in top shape when you've done your 4,000 meters of climbing, you're in high consumption mode, and the slightest mistake on nutrition could cost you, or hydration, because sometimes when it's cold, you often don't think about drinking enough, and we know now that dehydration is even worse than a hunger flash.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, Nico. We finished at 2,095 meters today, well above altitude. All of these riders, from time to time, strategically will train at altitude, sleep at altitude. Some teams actually use altitude tents, and Lotto Destiny, some of their riders have used altitude tents in the past as well to replicate the conditions up. But Nico, can you just, we've got 45 minutes of climbing still to go, 1 minute 33 for our three leaders, but just explain, you've just highlighted some of the important factors, the impact factors, the importance of fueling, the importance of pacing, the importance of hydration when you're riding at altitude. But what does it actually feel like? I mean, these riders are highly honed athletes, but once you go above 1,600 meters and you're moving into altitude, physically, what does it feel like, and how does that change the effort on the bike that you're able to make?
Yeah, so for me personally, I could start feeling the altitude around 1,700, and it would really make a difference. And this is why, for example, I was a lot more comfortable on the lower mountains in the Vuelta than in the ones in the Tour or the Giro that were often above 1,800. I could always feel that this, obviously the oxygen starts to be more rare, so you struggle, your breathing becomes heavier, but also you have to be very cautious of your power. Your power drops quite substantially as you go up with altitude, so it's always important to kind of recalibrate or refocus on your numbers, because they will evolve between the bottom of the climb and the top of the climb, because we see just the Ghent not happy with the speed again, so it's very funny for them to be playing that attacking role when there's still a minute 30 and it's a long way to go. You'd think they'd be riding together, but they must have had a bit of an argument now, and everyone's trying to show who's the strongest of that group. But
wow.
To go back to the altitude, then what I felt when I struggled, because there were days where things were much better, and especially when it was